Once upon a time, there was an old castle deep in the middle of a dark, eerie forest. In that castle lived an old fairy. This fairy could change into any form she liked. During the day, she would fly around as an owl or sneak through the countryside like a cat. But at night, she always returned to her true form, an old woman. Whenever a young man came within 100 steps of the castle, he would suddenly freeze and be unable to move until the fairy came and released him. But she wouldn't do that until he promised never to return. If a young woman entered that same area, she would be turned into a bird, placed in a cage, and hung in one of the castle's rooms. There were 700 of these cages in the castle, each with a beautiful bird inside. There was once a girl named Jorinda. She was more beautiful than anyone had ever seen. A young shepherd named Jorindel was deeply in love with her, and they were soon to be married. One day, the two of them went for a walk in the forest to enjoy some time alone. Jorindel warned, "We have to be careful not to get too close to the fairy's castle." It was a beautiful evening. The last golden light of the sunset streamed through the tall trees and lit up the green forest floor. Doves cooed gently in the birches above. Jorinda sat down and gazed at the sunset. Jorindel sat beside her, and they both felt a strange sadness, though they didn't know why. It felt as if they might be separated forever. They had wandered far, and when they tried to find their way back, they realized they were lost. The sun was sinking quickly, half of it already hidden behind the hills. Suddenly, Jorindel looked behind them, and to his horror, saw through the trees that they had unknowingly sat right near the castle walls. His heart dropped, his face turned pale, and he began to tremble. Just then, Jorinda began to sing. The ringdove sang from the willow tree, "Alas, alas." He cried for the fate of his dearest mate, alas. Her song was suddenly cut short. Jorindel turned to her, only to see that she had been transformed into a nightingale. Her song ended with a sorrowful jug, jug. An owl with glowing red eyes flew 3 times around them, screeching each time, "To-wit, to-wit, to-wit." Jorindel couldn't move a muscle. He was frozen like a statue, unable to cry, speak, or lift a finger. The sun set completely, and night fell. The owl flew into a bush, and moments later, the old fairy stepped out. She was pale and thin, with bulging eyes and a nose and chin so long they nearly touched. She muttered something to herself, grabbed the nightingale, and walked away with it in her hand. Poor Jorindel saw her take the bird, but there was nothing he could do. He couldn't move or speak. Soon the fairy returned and sang in a rough, raspy voice. "Now the prisoner's caught, and her fate is wrought. Stay. Oh, stay. When the charm is near her, and the spell will steer her, fly away, away." Suddenly, Jorindel was free again. He dropped to his knees and begged the fairy to give him back his beloved Jorinda. But she only laughed and said he would never see her again, then disappeared. He pleaded, cried, and grieved, but it was no use. "What will I do now?" he said sadly. He couldn't bear to return home, so he went to live in a faraway village and worked as a shepherd. And many times he walked as close as he dared to the cursed castle, but it was pointless. He saw and heard nothing of Jorinda. One night he had a dream. In it, he found a beautiful purple flower, and inside, the flower was a glowing pearl. He dreamt that he picked the flower, walked with it into the castle, and that anything the flower touched was released from enchantment. In the dream, he found Jorinda there again. When he woke up, he was filled with hope and began searching across hills and valleys for the flower. He searched for 8 days without luck. But on the 9th day, early in the morning, he found it. A stunning purple flower with a large dewdrop in the center that sparkled like a pearl. He picked the flower and set off right away, traveling day and night until he reached the castle once more. This time he was able to walk within 100 steps of the castle without freezing. In fact, he walked all the way up to the door without any problem. Jorindel was overjoyed. He touched the door with the flower, and it opened instantly. He stepped into the courtyard and listened to the sound of many birds singing filled the air. Eventually, he came to the room where the fairy sat, surrounded by 700 singing birds, each in its own cage. When she saw him, she flew into a rage and screamed in fury. But she couldn't come within 2 yards of him as he was protected by the flower. He looked around at all the birds, but there were so many nightingales. How could he tell which one was Jorinda? As he stood there thinking, he noticed the fairy taking down a cage and trying to sneak away. He rushed after her, touched the cage with the flower, and there stood Jorinda, back in her human form, as beautiful as ever. She threw her arms around him. Jorindel then touched all the other birds with the flower, and one by one, they all turned back into young women. He took Jorinda home, and soon after they were married, living happily together for many years. And so did many others, whose sweethearts had been trapped for far too long in the fairies' cages, finally freed to live happily ever after.